Annuncio vobis
I announce
gaudium
to you
magnum.
a great joy.
Habemus papam.
We have a pope.
Pope Leo XIV, the Augustinian pope leading a new era. Cardinal Robert Prevost, now Pope Leo XIV, leads a rosary prayer for Pope Francis's health in St. Peter's Square, March 2025. It captures his humble and prayerful leadership style shortly before he became pope. Prevost would soon bring this down-to-earth approach to the world stage as pope. White smoke billows from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel. A jubilant crowd erupts in St. Peter's Square. It's May 2025, and the announcement rings out, Habemus Papam, we have a pope. The new pope is Robert Francis Cardinal Prevost from Chicago, who has chosen the name Pope Leo XIV. It's a historic moment. The Catholic Church has its first North American pope, and indeed the first American-born pope. And he comes from a religious order with deep roots in history. Who is Pope Leo XIV? What shaped this Augustinian friar turned pope, and what might his leadership mean for Catholics and the wider world? Let's explore his journey from the Chicago suburbs to the throne of St. Peter, and what the world can expect from his papacy. Early life in Chicago and Augustinian calling. Pope Leo XIV was born Robert Francis Prevost on September 14, 1955, in Chicago, Illinois. He grew up in a multicultural household. His father was of French and Italian descent, and his mother of Spanish heritage. Young Robert served as an altar boy at his local parish on Chicago's South Side, hinting early on at a calling to serve the church. For high school, he entered the minor seminary of the Augustinians in 1973, embracing a path of faith during his teen years. An excellent student, he went on to earn a bachelor's degree in mathematics from Villanova University in 1977. A reminder that he's as comfortable with numbers and logic as he is with theology. After college, Prevost felt a deeper pull towards religious life. In 1977, he joined the Order of St. Augustine, a Catholic religious order inspired by the teachings of St. Augustine. Augustinians are known for balancing love and learning in their way of life, living together in community and seeking God through study and service. Prevost took his first vows as an Augustinian in 1978 and solemn vows, lifelong commitment, in 1981. He continued his religious studies, earning a Master of Divinity, and then heading to Rome for a doctorate in canon law. On June 19, 1982, Robert Prevost was ordained a priest in Rome. By then, he was fluent in multiple languages, English and Spanish, his mother's tongue, and eventually Italian, French, and Portuguese as well. This linguistic talent would later allow him to connect with people all over the world.
A mi querida diócesis de Chiclayo en el Peru.
Missionary years in Peru. Not long after ordination, Prevost embarked on a missionary adventure. At age 30, he was sent to serve in Peru in 1985. For a kid from Chicago, the Peruvian coastal and Andean culture was a whole new world, but he embraced it wholeheartedly. He worked in the territorial prelature of Chulucanas in northern Peru, getting his first taste of mission life. By 1988, he moved to the city of Trujillo, Peru, where he would spend a full decade wearing many hats. He became the director of an Augustinian seminary, a teacher of canon law in the local diocesan seminary, and even a judge on a church tribunal handling marriage and other ecclesiastical cases. At the same time, he was entrusted with pastoral duty in poor urban neighborhoods. He led a congregation in a developing suburb and later a parish called St. Rita's from 1988 to 1999. Picture a dedicated priest moving from classrooms to village chapels to church offices, fluent in Spanish and winning hearts with his down-to-earth style. These years in Peru shaped Prevost profoundly. He wasn't just an American priest abroad, he became part of the Peruvian church's fabric. Immersed in the struggles of ordinary Peruvians, whether teaching young seminarians or ministering in shantytowns, he gained a global outlook far beyond his U.S. roots. In fact, he spent so much time overseas that a Vatican journalist dubbed him the least American of the Americans among church leaders. Prevost learned to adapt and to appreciate different cultures within Catholicism. This would later give him common ground with cardinals and Catholics from all over the world. By 1999, after nearly 14 years in Peru, with a short break back in Chicago in 1987, he had built a reputation as a capable teacher, a compassionate pastor, and a bridge between North and South American church experiences. Leadership in the Augustinian order. After years on the mission frontier, Father Prevost was called back stateside. In 1999, he was elected to lead the Augustinians' Chicago province, the region of Midwest USA. But his rise didn't stop there. Just 2 years later, in 2001, the worldwide Augustinian order chose him as their prior general, essentially the global head of the Augustinians. He moved to Rome and for the next 12 years, 2001 to 2013, guided Augustinian communities in almost 50 countries. He was constantly on the move, visiting friars and ministries on different continents. A true globe-trotting monk. This role honed his administrative skills and gave him a big-picture perspective on the church's needs in Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Americas. Those who worked with him noticed his tireless work ethic. Despite a reserved, almost shy demeanor, he proved to be cosmopolitan in outlook and able to connect with both conservatives and progressives in the church. In short, he earned respect as a leader who listens and an organizer who gets things done. By 2013, after 2 elected terms, Prevost finished his service as prior general and returned to his home province in the U.S. for a bit. But his international experience had put him on the Vatican's radar. He had become a seasoned administrator, a man of the church who understood life in the pews and the corridors of power. This unique blend of qualities would soon lead him to a new mission back in South America, this time as a bishop in Peru, and a return to the front lines. In late 2014, Pope Francis tapped Robert Prevost to return to Peru, but now with a bishop's cross on his chest. He was appointed apostolic administrator and then bishop of Chiclayo, a diocese in northern Peru. Bishop Prevost was consecrated in Chiclayo's cathedral on December 12, 2014, and officially took charge of the diocese in 2015. Stepping into this role, he was back on the front lines of pastoral work, overseeing priests, tending to the spiritual and social needs of Catholics in that region. He quickly became involved in broader issues too. Within the Peruvian Bishops' Conference, he was elected to lead the Commission for Education and Culture in 2019, reflecting his passion for learning and young people. He also helped guide Caritas Peru, the church's charity arm, as part of its leadership, working on poverty relief and social projects. And when neighboring dioceses hit crisis, Francis trusted Prevost to step in. In 2020, he served as the temporary administrator of the Diocese of Callao during a turbulent period. Bishop Prevost's time in Peru was not without challenges. He had to confront the painful issue of clergy sexual abuse that has troubled the church. In one notable case, allegations surfaced that years earlier a priest in Chiclayo had abused minors and that the church response was insufficient. When a Peruvian TV program in 2024 accused then-Bishop Prevost of failing to act, the diocese defended him. Prevost met personally with the victims, removed the accused priest from ministry, and launched an investigation in 2022, forwarding all findings to the Vatican. Both the Vatican and civil authorities ultimately found insufficient evidence to prosecute further, but Prevost's actions showed he took the matter seriously. Earlier in his career back in Chicago, he had also learned hard lessons about handling abusive clergy. In 2000, as an Augustinian provincial, he faced criticism for allowing a monitored but credibly accused priest to live near a school without informing the community. That incident impressed on him the need for stricter safeguards. These experiences, while difficult, likely deepened his resolve to ensure accountability and protection for the vulnerable. Through it all, he earned a reputation in Chiclayo as a fair and approachable bishop who didn't shy away from problems. He stayed closely aligned with Pope Francis's vision of a transparent, service-oriented church. Rise in the Vatican. In early 2023, Rome came calling again, this time with one of the Vatican's most influential positions. Pope Francis asked Bishop Prevost to become the prefect of the dicastery for bishops, essentially the Pope's right-hand man in selecting bishops worldwide. It was a major vote of confidence, and Prevost's appointment was telling. Francis specifically chose someone from outside the usual Vatican circle. Prevost himself noted that Francis did not want someone from the Roman Curia. He wanted a missionary, someone from outside, with a different perspective. In this new role, Archbishop, soon Cardinal Prevost, began traveling the world not as a missionary or order superior, but as a talent scout for future church leaders. He met with hundreds of bishops during their ad limina visits, when bishops report to Rome, and gained insight into the needs of dioceses from Asia to Africa. In September 2023, Pope Francis made Prevost a cardinal, further raising his profile. As prefect, Prevost brought a pastoral heart to what could be a dry, bureaucratic job. We are often worried about teaching doctrine, but we risk forgetting that our first duty is to communicate the beauty and joy of knowing Jesus, he said in one interview. This was a clear signal of how he approached bishop appointments, looking for pastors more than ideologues. Under his watch, the Vatican's criteria for new bishops shifted to favor those who put people before politics. He also welcomed women's input in the process, embracing Pope Francis's decision to include women on the board that vets bishop candidates, saying it contributes significantly to discernment. Cardinal Prevost gained respect for tackling some thorny situations too. For instance, he had to address the case of a controversial U.S. bishop in Texas accused of sowing division. Prevost's dicastery ordered an investigation, showing he was willing to rein in even high-profile church figures when necessary. By early 2025, church watchers worldwide took note. Here was a cardinal with broad experience, missionary, teacher, order superior, diocesan bishop, Vatican official, and a reputation for being appreciated by conservatives and progressives alike. In other words, a potential unifier and possibly a candidate to be the next pope. The 2025 conclave, expectations and election. When Pope Francis died in early 2025, it set the stage for a conclave, the secretive election by cardinals to choose a new pope. The world's eyes turned to Rome, wondering what kind of leader would next guide the Catholic Church. Many within the Church hoped for someone who would continue Francis' trajectory of pastoral outreach and reform. Others were concerned about internal divisions and wanted a healer who could unify the Church. As the College of Cardinals gathered, a number of names floated as papabile, possible popes, from veteran Vatican insiders to voices from the global South. Cardinal Robert Prevost was increasingly mentioned, despite the fact that no American had ever become pope. His unique profile, a Vatican insider who was still an outsider in upbringing, made him an intriguing compromise candidate. He had the doctrinal credentials and Roman experience, but also the missionary touch and international relatability. On the second day of the conclave, May 8, 2025, the cardinals reached a decision. Smoke poured white from the Sistine Chapel chimney, and soon the announcement came. Cardinal Prevost had been elected the 267th Pope. He made history as the first Pope from the United States, and indeed from North America. Stepping onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, he greeted the world now as Pope Leo XIV. The choice of name caught many by surprise. Leo had not been used since Pope Leo XIII in 1903. Vatican observers speculated on its meaning. Perhaps he chose it in honor of Leo XIII, who was a champion of social justice and modern engagement, author of the landmark 1891 social encyclical Rerum Novarum. Or maybe he was inspired by Saint Leo the Great, the 5th century pope who courageously defended the faith. The name Leo, Latin for lion, certainly evokes boldness. Whatever the intent, it signaled continuity with tradition and strength. Leo XIV's first words as pope, spoken in Italian to the crowd, were a simple, heartfelt greeting. Peace be with all of you. He imparted his first apostolic blessing, asking the people to pray for him in return. For Catholics in the Americas, seeing one of their own as pope was momentous. He is only the second pope from the New World after Francis. In Prevost's hometown of Chicago and in Peru, where he served, people rejoiced. The world's media introduced this new pope with headlines about his American roots, his Augustinian background, and his reputation as a moderate bridge builder. There was a sense of both excitement and curiosity. What changes or steady guidance would Pope Leo XIV bring? In the midst of the fanfare, one thing was clear. A new chapter in the Church had begun, led by a man who embodies both old-school Catholic tradition and a new world, pastoral sensibility. An Augustinian on the throne of Peter. One particularly unique aspect of Pope Leo XIV is that he is an Augustinian friar, the first member of the Order of St. Augustine ever to become pope. This means the spiritual DNA of St. Augustine, a 5th century doctor of the Church, is part of Leo XIV's identity. Augustinians live by the ethos of community life and the pursuit of truth through love. The order's emblem is a heart on fire, pierced by an arrow over an open book, symbolizing love of God, ardor for truth, and the Word of God. In practice, Augustinians emphasize a balance of intellect and charity, or, as one motto puts it, to be of one mind and heart on the way to God. Prevost's own formation reflected this blend of love and learning. He is scholarly, with a doctorate in canon law, yet approachable, living in community with fellow friars for decades. We can expect that this background instilled in him a deep commitment to collegiality, teamwork in leadership, and humility. Unlike diocesan bishops who often operate somewhat independently, an Augustinian is used to making decisions with his brothers and valuing each person's voice, a style that could carry into his governance of the universal church. Having a pope from a mendicant order, a religious order that relies on charity and lives simply, is rare in modern times. The last few centuries saw mostly diocesan priests elected pope, with Pope Francis, a Jesuit, being a notable exception. Leo XIV's election underlines the diversity of Catholic leadership today. It also draws a parallel. Just as Francis brought Jesuit spirituality, emphasizing missionary outreach and discernment, to the papacy, Leo XIV brings Augustinian spirituality. What might that mean in concrete terms? For one, a focus on community. St. Augustine's rule begins by calling monks to live harmoniously, being of one mind and heart. Leo XIV might similarly stress unity in the global church, the idea that we are a single family of faith, journeying together despite differences. In fact, he has already lamented that the lack of unity is a wound. Divisions and polemics in the church do not help anything, reflecting his desire for greater communion. We might see him promoting dialogue and reconciliation between factions, much as an Augustinian prior works to keep harmony in the monastery. Another hallmark of Augustinians is their intellectual heritage. After all, their patron Saint Augustine. Augustine was one of Christianity's greatest thinkers. Leo XIV could well be an intellectual pope in his own right, not in a dry academic way, but by engaging contemporary issues with depth and faith. Don't be surprised if he occasionally quotes St. Augustine's famous lines or writes in a way that bridges theology with everyday life. And then there's the aspect of simplicity and charity. Augustinians take vows of poverty and live simply, so Pope Leo XIV might favor a less opulent papal lifestyle. He's experienced living in modest communities and serving in impoverished areas, so he may continue Pope Francis's example of a humble papacy, perhaps by prioritizing the poor and marginalized in his initiatives. In essence, having an Augustinian pope today means the Church is led by someone who deeply values unity, learning, and loving service. It's a reminder that the papacy isn't just a position of power, but also one of spiritual leadership rooted in a particular charism, in Leo XIV's case, the spirit of St. Augustine. Addressing modern challenges. LGBTQ issues. Pope Leo XIV steps into the papacy at a time when LGBTQ questions are prominent both in society and within the Church. How will this pope approach these sensitive issues? His track record suggests a pastoral but traditional balance. As an Augustinian and a bishop, Prevost was never known as a culture warrior on these matters, but rather as a listener. He is expected to uphold the Catholic teaching that marriage is between a man and a woman. That doctrine is clear. However, following the tone set by Pope Francis, Leo XIV is also likely to emphasize compassion and inclusion. In the past, he highlighted communicating the joy of the gospel over harping on rules in cronline.org, which implies he will focus on welcoming people rather than alienating them. We might see him encourage clergy to provide pastoral care to LGBTQ individuals and their families, ensuring they do not feel rejected by the Church. For example, he could support initiatives for dialogue and accompaniment, listening sessions, support groups, or blessings for individuals. Not same-sex marriages, but prayers for people seeking God's grace in their lives. This would follow the approach of loving the sinner, not the sin, treating LGBTQ persons with respect and sensitivity. The world, especially younger Catholics, will be watching how Leo XIV navigates this terrain. While doctrinal changes, like approving same-sex marriage or ordaining openly gay-partnered individuals, are not expected, his tone and actions will speak volumes. A compassionate approach could build on Francis's famous "Who am I to judge?" ethos, showing that the Church can hold to its teachings while extending love to everyone. Doctrinal continuity. In choosing the papal name Leo XIV, Prevost signaled a respect for tradition. Pope Leo XIII, the last Leo in the late 19th century, was known for engaging the modern world with solid doctrine, and Leo the Great defended orthodox teaching in turbulent times. Pope Leo XIV is widely seen as a man of doctrinal continuity. He has a strong background in canon law and theology, so he's not likely to introduce radical doctrinal changes. Don't expect reversals on core issues like the ordination of women to the priesthood, which recent popes have said is not possible, or the Church's pro-life stance. Those will remain constant. However, continuity doesn't mean inactivity. Leo XIV will continue the mission of applying unchanging truths to changing times. Think of it as renewal within tradition. As he himself pointed out, focusing solely on doctrine without communicating the faith's joyful essence is a risk. So we might see him package the Church's teachings in a more engaging, uplifting way. For instance, he might emphasize the beauty of Catholic teaching on the family or the profound mercy at the heart of moral teachings. He is also likely to continue the path of the Synod on synodality, a major initiative under Francis to make the Church more consultative and inclusive in decision-making. Through such synods and conversations, He can ensure the Church's doctrine is heard and discussed at all levels, even as it remains consistent. In summary, Pope Leo XIV will guard the deposit of faith firmly, but he will strive to present it in a way that resonates with people today, just as a wise teacher would. Clergy abuse accountability. The clergy abuse crisis is a shadow that Leo XIV is determined to dispel. Having dealt with cases of abuse during his time as a provincial and as a bishop, he understands both the horror of abuse and the damage caused by any failure to act. As we saw in Chiclayo, he took action by meeting victims and suspending an accused priest, forwarding the case to Rome. Expect Pope Leo XIV to be emphatic that the Church adopt a zero-tolerance policy everywhere. In practical terms, he will likely strengthen the Church's mechanisms for accountability, supporting global safe environment protocols, holding bishops accountable if they fail to protect their flock, building on Pope Francis norms like Vos Estis Lux Mundi, and ensuring transparency when abuse allegations arise. He has already shown support for involving lay people, including women, in church governance. This could extend to abuse review boards and safeguarding efforts to inject more objectivity. Importantly, Leo XIV might mandate better training for seminarians on these issues and better screening to prevent abusive personalities from being ordained. He knows trust needs to be rebuilt. As he said regarding bishops, a leader must not live isolated or beyond accountability. We can expect him to apply that principle to himself and all clergy. Observers will be looking for decisive actions. Will he remove bishops who covered up abuse? Will he meet with survivor groups early on? These would send strong signals. For Pope Leo, ensuring justice for victims and preventing future abuse isn't just about the Church's image. It's about the gospel imperative to care for the least of these. The success of his papacy will, in part, be measured by how effectively the Church under his watch can say, "Never again," and mean it. Financial oversight. The Vatican's finances have historically been murky, but recent popes began cleaning house, and Pope Leo XIV seems poised to continue, if not intensify, that cleanup. In his years managing the Augustinians worldwide, Prevost oversaw budgets and projects across dozens of countries, giving him a solid administrative pedigree. He is known as a governor as well as a teacher, meaning he understands governance and the need for accountability. With scandals in the 2010s, like the Vatican investment fiascos, still fresh, Leo XIV will aim for a Vatican that is both holier and more honest in its handling of money. We might see him empower the Secretariat for the Economy, the office overseeing finances, and continue the work of making the Vatican Bank and other entities comply with international financial standards. Another expectation is that he'll support Pope Francis's measures that professionalize procurement and budgeting in the Vatican. Since Leo XIV isn't enmeshed in Italian political circles, he's an outsider with an American straightforwardness. He could have an easier time saying no to any financial misconduct or cronyism. He once navigated the finances of a global religious order where transparency and trust were key to keeping donations flowing for mission work. Now, as Pope, he'll want Catholics to trust that their Peter's Pence donations and contributions are used for charity and evangelization, not lost in corruption. In short, anticipate a papacy of continued fiscal reform, one that pushes the Vatican to be an example of integrity. It's often said that where your treasure is, there your heart will be. By putting the Church's financial house in order, Leo XIV will be trying to ensure the Church's heart stays on its true treasure, serving God's people. What to expect from Pope Leo XIV's papacy? Bridge builder. Leo XIV has been described as appreciated by conservatives and progressives, a rare trait. We can expect him to be a bridge builder who strives to heal internal rifts. He values unity highly, warning that division is a painful wound in the Church. So he'll likely promote dialogue between different factions, traditionalists and reformers, for example, aiming to foster a spirit of family despite differences. This could mean convening conversations on contentious issues and encouraging everyone to focus on common faith and mission rather than what divides us. Pastoral continuity with a personal touch. In many ways, Leo XIV will continue the pastoral approach of Pope Francis. Like Francis, he spent years in the peripheries, far from Vatican luxury, and has a heart for the ordinary faithful. We may see a personal, informal touch in his papacy. Think of him jumping into crowds to bless babies or choosing a simple apartment-style lodging as Pope. Stories from his past, like having lunch in humble parishes or traveling extensively to meet people, suggest he won't rule from behind a desk. He might also continue initiatives like the Synod on Synodality, showing that he wants to hear from the grassroots. His style will probably emphasize walking with the people, a shepherd who smells of his sheep, as Francis would say, rather than a monarch issuing decrees from on high. Youth and education. Given his background as a teacher and seminary formator, Pope Leo XIV will likely put a spotlight on young people and education. He knows the importance of the next generation. Don't be surprised if he energizes events like World Youth Day, engaging directly with youth in multiple languages. He speaks 5 fluently. He might champion Catholic schools and universities, perhaps drawing on his own experiences at Villanova and as a seminary professor to modernize Catholic education. He understands that young Catholics today face many challenges to their faith, so he could encourage new youth ministries, digital outreach, maybe a stronger Vatican presence on social media, and honest discussions with young adults about their questions. His ability to speak plainly and kindly could resonate well with youth, helping bridge the gap between the ancient church and the digital generation. Global perspective. For Pope Leo XIV, the church is truly global, and so is his mindset. Having lived roughly 2/3 of his life outside the US in places like Peru and Rome, he sees beyond any one nation's viewpoint. We can expect him to continue internationalizing the leadership of the church. This might include appointing cardinals from countries that have never had representation in the College of Cardinals, ensuring the church's top ranks reflect its demographic spread. On issues like climate change, migration, or economic inequality, Leo XIV is likely to speak out in continuity with his predecessors. He witnessed poverty in Peru and can relate to the struggles of developing nations. Thus, he might strongly back initiatives on social justice, echoing themes of past encyclicals like Laudato Si. His global savvy also means he could be a diplomatic pope, perhaps playing peacemaker in conflicts, using the church's soft power for mediation, or forging dialogues with other faiths, building on the bridges that Pope Francis built with the Muslim and Jewish communities. The wider world may find in Leo XIV a pope who, while American-born, is very much a citizen of the world. Augustinian spirituality in action. Finally, one of the most intriguing things to watch will be how Pope Leo XIV's Augustinian spirituality permeates his actions. Saint Augustine taught that our hearts are restless until they rest in God. Leo XIV might focus the church on addressing that spiritual restlessness of modern humanity. This could mean a renewed emphasis on interior conversion, prayer, and the timeless wisdom of the Church Fathers. Augustine's writings on love, grace, and community are still remarkably relevant. He might compose a teaching document, perhaps an encyclical, inspired by Augustine's ideas. For instance, on the importance of hope or on seeking truth in an age of confusion. We might also see him encourage the faithful to read Scripture and the works of the saints more deeply, blending intellectual faith formation with heartfelt devotion. And, true to Augustine's community-minded ideal, Leo XIV may work closely with the College of Bishops, strengthening the idea of synodality, walking together, If there are tensions between local church practices and Rome, he might use Augustine's principle. In essentials, unity. In non-essentials, liberty. In all things, charity, as a guiding light. In essence, expect Pope Leo XIV to lead not just with policies, but with a distinct spiritual flavor. One that highlights the restless human heart's search for God's love, something he will remind both Catholics and the wider world about. As Pope Leo XIV begins his ministry, he carries with him a remarkable personal journey and a set of values forged in prayer, community, and service. He's a man who can cite canon law by memory, yet also quote a line of scripture or Augustine that cuts to the heart. A man who has dined in both impoverished villages and the halls of the Vatican. This blend of experiences positions him to both challenge and counsel the Church. Catholics and non-Catholics alike can expect a papacy that is compassionate in tone, steady in teaching, and proactive in addressing the wounds of the Church. And for young people watching, Pope Leo XIV might just be a relatable figure. A math and canon law nerd turned kindly grandpa of the Catholic family who's not afraid to roll up his sleeves and lead by example. Time will tell how his story unfolds, but one thing is sure. This Augustinian Pope is set to make his mark by bringing the light of faith to a world in need, with a lion-hearted courage and an ever-burning love. See you soon on another episode.